Today we're going to make oxtail stew. What we have for ingredients are oxtail, which is actually the tail of a cow, not the ox, celery, carrots, bay leaf, garlic, onions, 2 quarts of beef broth, which was homemade, and on a future video you will see how I make my own homemade beef bone broth. Also some potatoes, I canned this summer. There'll be a video on that as well in the future. And a bottle of wine and some homemade lard for sauteing the vegetables in. That lard was rendered at home, and I'll also have a video on that in the future. Salt and pepper. So those are the main ingredients that we're going to use today to make oxtail soup or oxtail stew, and that is excellent on a cold winter's night or just for a hearty meal. Okay, the next step in the process, before we brown the oxtail, we're going to go ahead and chop up our vegetables, get them ready to go into the brown drippings of the oxtail after we brown it. The onions, carrots, celery, garlic, get them all chopped up and get them prepared to go into the cast iron pot. Okay, before we brown the oxtail, we're going to go ahead and melt down about 2 tablespoons of lard, and then we'll put the oxtails in and brown them up and then transfer them to a plate while we saute the vegetables. Okay, now we're going to take the oxtails and put them into the hot lard. It's on medium-high heat. We want to get these oxtails into the pot, get them browned on all sides. As you see, they're not all even sizes, but that's okay. We'll just get them all brown on each side. Add a little salt and a little pepper, and let them start cooking down. Okay, they've been browning here for a few minutes on that one side. They should look like that right before you turn them over, okay? It's kind of a nice brown. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and turn that over now and turn all the rest of them over. Get them all brown on each side. So we're going to have to do this a couple more times, and then I'll show you how we saute the vegetables down on the next step. Okay, once they're done browning, you'll know they'll look like this on all sides. Go ahead and transfer these to a plate. Now that they're transferred to a plate, we'll let them off here to the side. We'll go ahead and get our vegetables. And if you can see into the pot, you can see there's some drippings from the oxtail, as well as the lard, little brown pieces of meat. This is going to go great sauteing those vegetables. And then we're going to deglaze the pan with red wine. So right now I'm going to go ahead and get the vegetables, put them in, and show you how to saute them. Okay, now we have the vegetables. We have the onion, celery, carrot, garlic in the pot. We're going to go ahead and saute these till they're translucent. Okay, we don't want to overcook these. We want to make them just sauteed until they're translucent. Alright, now you can see that the vegetables are translucent. They've been cooked down just about perfect. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a little bit of salt, probably, a teaspoon and a half of salt, and some black pepper. Now you're probably asking, if I'm using beef broth, why am I putting salt on the vegetables and a little bit on the meat? The beef broth I'm using is actually homemade beef broth, has no salt in it. That's the way broth should be made, with no salt. Then you season the dish to taste. Now, if you're going to buy beef broth in the store, then it's going to be salty, so you're going to want to make sure that you don't oversalt while preparing the dish. Okay, now you're ready to deglaze the pan before you put the meat back in. I'm going to use a nice red wine, a Merlot. I don't know, that's probably about 3 cups. 2.5 cups of Merlot. And you want to get all that good stuff off the bottom, all the brown bits, anything that might be stuck to the cast iron pan. You want to get that and then go ahead and bring it to a simmer like this. Okay, now we're ready to add the beef oxtail back in. I want to just put those into the vegetables here. Get any of the juice that came off of that because it's really good in the stew. Okay, now I'm going to put the beef broth in. Alright, now we're going to add the homemade beef broth. There's 1 quart and 2 quarts. Now we're going to bring this to a simmer, to a boil actually. Then we're going to put it in a 250 degree oven for approximately 5 to 6 hours, depending on how you like your stew. These oxtails will braise down in this beef broth and wine mixture with the vegetables, and they'll be tender, really tender, fork tender. So in about 5 to 6 hours, we'll be ready to pull this off. Now the potatoes, I don't put the potatoes in, especially since I canned the potatoes. They're already partially cooked, okay, through the canning process. So I'll put the potatoes into the stew probably an hour and a half before it's finished. Okay, once the oxtail stew gets to a boil on the stove, we're going to go ahead and put the lid to your pot back on it. Now you're going to want to use oven gloves because it does get hot, especially cast iron. And we're going to transfer this into the oven at 250 degrees. Now we're going to keep that in the oven for anywhere from 5 to 6 hours, depending upon how quickly it cooks for your stew and how you like it. We'll be back about an hour and a half before to put the potatoes in, and so we'll see you then. Okay, it's been about 4.5 hours, and we're going to go ahead and take it out now and put the potatoes in it. Ooh, looks good. Looks a little liquidy, but when you put the potatoes in, they'll act as a starch and it'll thicken up. So we're going to put our potatoes in with some of the starch water from the home canned potatoes. Mix them in and put it back in the oven for another hour, hour and a half. Again at 250. Alright, I've taken it out of the oven. However, I think this is still a little too liquidy for me, for my taste. So I'm going to go ahead and thicken it. Now if you don't want to thicken it and this is fine for you, then go ahead and serve it. But I'm going to go ahead and thicken it here with a little bit of cornstarch and water. And then we'll be ready to, I'll do this over the stove and then we'll be ready to serve it. Okay, what I've got here is 2 tablespoons of cornstarch and a 1/4 cup of water. And I'm just going to go ahead and pour it in here, bring it to a boil, and thicken it. So I'll show you what that looks like when we're finished bringing it to a boil and thickening it. Okay, we brought this back up to a boil after adding the 2 tablespoons of cornstarch starch and water. This is a perfect consistency for how we like our stew. If you like it a little thicker, add more cornstarch. Now we've already seasoned this, and the seasoning is perfect to taste for us, but what you want to do is taste the stew at this time, add any salt or pepper as needed for your flavor, for your favorite type of flavor on this stew. If you want it more salty, add more salt, more pepper, etc. So now what we're going to do is go ahead and serve this, and I'll show you how the meat flakes off of the oxtail. So here is the finished product, the stew with the potatoes and everything that we cooked today. I'm going to show you how, you can see the meat in here is already flaked off and tender as we get little pieces of meat here. But I'm going to show you how tender this is. This is the oxtail. You can see how that meat just comes off with that little bit of cartilage and meat. This is an excellent meal. Most of the meat's already fallen off while it was in the stew, but you see how tender that is. That's from the braising of 5 to 6 hours. Alright, so the stew is finished. Now all you have to do is enjoy it. Thank you for watching.